Welcome everyone to our Tuesday Community Connections with My Self-Reliance. This is called Kawinda. It's our happy place where we meet every Tuesday, and we always have an amazing special guest, and tonight is no exception. So a lot of people have jumped on tonight because it's such an amazing topic. And anyone who knows anything about My Self-Reliance knows that I am very much all about food storage, and that's what we're going to learn about tonight is food storage. And so I want to introduce Oliver. Now, Oliver and I were have been chatting backwards and forwards for a long time, and I wanted you to get a little bit about Oliver's background, because as a dad to a 9-year-old and a truck driver, he has seen a lot go on over the last 2 years. Now, not only in those roles, but when Oliver got to see how the world shifted through COVID, he started to really look deeper, and that led him on a journey over to England. It led him diving down into the Bitcoin and understanding what was going on there. And he really uncovered some interesting things about the world. And I want him to share with you all a little bit about what did you see over there, Oliver, that really opened your eyes to what's going on to actually then lead you down to the track of the food storage as a solution.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So I went to England to figure out a technological solution to like a big accounting technology thing. And basically Satoshi Nakamoto, who was Dr. Craig Wright, was over there, and he has like over 1,000 patents in the Bitcoin SV space. And at that time, that's like over 2 years ago, like it really looked like a beneficial thing to the whole of society. So I put a lot of faith into that. That's the way the world looked at that time. But you know, COVID came along and everything shut down. And then that platform, that type of cryptocurrency, you know, they started to talk about cooperating with central banks, and I was like, hang on, something's not right here. I'm wondering if this might be part of the elite thing. So I started to deep dive that rabbit hole, which is kind of something I've got a bit of a knack for, is going down rabbit holes without getting too insane. Yeah, that was a bit of that. Does anyone who here knows does anyone know who Satoshi Nakamoto could be other than Dr. Craig Wright?
Maybe just type in the chat if that rings a bell for anyone. You can just type yes if that sounds familiar to you, because this is all new to me when I heard about it. So I thought there'll be some people on here who know all about Bitcoin and know who that person is. Okay, so Oliver, just when you're speaking, if you want to come a little bit closer to the camera for us, that's great. Okay, beautiful. And then, so share with us what happened next.
I basically went leave without pay from work, from truck driving, because I couldn't see that there was going to be a way through, and I didn't really want to fight. So I fled to Queensland and hung out in the bush. Yeah, hung out in the suburban bush up there in bits of Queensland, kind of looking for something like My Self-Reliance, but I ended up back in Sydney. And then so you know, being part of Bitcoin, I was also a bit of a gold bug. But when I started to listen to the preppers, I realized that they're not the same types of people. The gold bugs still think that society basically works, and just the economic systems, what's going to collapse. Whereas the preppers are like, no, the whole thing's going to collapse. And then basically realized that the Mylar bags are pretty much the simplest way of saving food. It's like the simplest, most robust way of doing it. So that's why I went down that rabbit hole, and yeah, that's that.
So I know Oliver's very humble, and he doesn't want to, you know, kind of blow his own trumpet here, but our conversations has led us to uncovering something that's really cool. And so, Oliver, you want to take us through your presentation? I'll get you to share your screen. And you will be able to see more of Oliver at our expo coming up on the 29th of April. And if you want to find out more about that, go to www.myselfreliance.com.au, and there you'll see all of our events. We've got lots of events coming up. This Saturday, if you're interested in a healthy way of being that's easy and tasty, but getting all your nutrients in through gut health, then we have just a few spots left. I'm putting on a special presentation and it's limited seats only. So check the website for that. It's a smoothie bar. Then the following weekend, we have a permaculture course at Arimba in New South Wales, the 17th to the 19th of February. And that is with David Holberton. Now, that's one of the very best courses that you can do in the area of permaculture, and at a really amazing price, a full weekend with David. It'll be the only one that we do this season, and maybe we won't be holding it again until late 2023. So jump in on that. If you have any ideas of growing your own food, then that is the way to go. And then we have, for anyone who's in WA, we have a bush survival skills course happening on the 25th of February. So get along to that. It's only $145. If you get in before the 10th, you can get it for $125. And that's amazing value with Jared Jose Santana leading our bush survival in WA. So how are we going there, Oliver?
I think it's going to work this time.
Beautiful. We can hear you loud and strong. Okay, over to you.
Okay, cool. So yes, Mylar bags are the best, simplest, most stable, bulky, long-lasting food preparation system in comparison to anything else, relatively. But basically, and we'll cover more of that a little bit later. So how about we leave the doom and gloom for a little bit later in the presentation and get on to the big, juicy benefits. So the aim of the game is to have much more than you need. You want to freeze the prices, because that's the main certain annoying thing around food, kind of hitting us now and coming up soon. You want to be able to eat it or trade it. And if you get a chance to have it as seed stock or sprouting, sprouting for home, in the kitchen, that's also great. So basically the aim of the game is to have a mountain of food. And so this is kind of like my, one sentence summary of the whole thing. So grains and pulses sealed into Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers are the best value for money per kilo, per full meals for up to 10 years into the future, more than any other food storage system. So the smallest thing that's kind of good to focus on is to get a $500 wholesale order, spend $100 on the Mylar bags, which we'll talk about in a second, plus the oxygen absorbers, with about 5 hours of packaging and organizing work, will give you about 110 kilos of grains and pulses. It only takes up about 10 milk crates, and it'll feed about one person for 6 months. So how? Honest to Goodness is a wholesale and retail company in Sydney that supplies a lot of the whole health food stores, retail in Sydney, but they're really set up for group buying and individual people who want to buy as well. So $500 will give you a minimum wholesale order. And for instance, you know, this is just an example order. So $500 is not going to, it's really only like 4 or 5 different 25 kilo bags. So, you know, quinoa, chickpeas, rice, popcorn kernels, but they've got like 1,000 different things you can choose from. But basically, if you focus on the grains and pulses, you get that 10 years plus, but they've got all the dried fruits and, you know, yummy things and spices and things like that as well. Or if you really want to go super cheap, you can get it from absolutely wholesale, only $350 minimum with the no ABN. But you've also got to pay first. If you're in Sydney, there's a way of getting Honest to Goodness free of charge on delivery, but that's kind of in the details. Then you're going to buy these Mylar bags. I highly recommend just getting the Wallaby food ones. Unfortunately, you can only get them through amazon.com.au. There's other slightly cheaper ones around, but these guys have got the what do you call it? The thickest. They're the thickest, and they've got these packs of 10. It all comes together. Yeah, they're pretty much built for what we want to do. Then you get it all delivered, and now that'll give you, like, altogether you get like 30 bags of 3 kilos each. You get a total of 110 kilos. Yeah. So what you're avoiding by getting the Mylar bags is you're avoiding oxygenation because of the oxygen absorbers. The weevils can't live in there because there's no oxygen. The light's blocked by the thick plastic, and then there's no more moisture absorption. So the only thing you need to look after is keeping it cool as possible for as long as possible. So, however, it's clear that you know, having a farm is more important than food storage. Like, if you can produce food, it's more important. So this in terms of an investment. So gold is, you know, has some benefits. It's really small. It's easy to hide. It's somewhat tradable, but you can't eat it. And like I was saying before, the gold bugs and that system works in somewhat of a normal society. Yeah, gold prices go up and that holds its value, but because you'll have like 10 years to eat this food, well, you could start eating it in 7 years' time and still be ahead because of the inflation. The inflation is kind of almost certain. And then, yeah, I don't recommend any other investment. So if you can get yourself into a farm, I'll just mention something at the end about that. That's the best, but that's kind of a larger commitment. Like this stuff, for $600, you've got yourself in the door, and you kind of can't lose on that investment, so to speak. Any questions so far? Where are we? Everyone's gone silent. Maybe I will. All good. All right, I'll keep going.
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry, this is Mitz or D2. Now with the foods you mentioned before, to say like the sweet things, but not everything can really go in the Mylar bag, because doesn't that go rancid? Is that the word?
Yeah. So the recommendation of the grains, the grains and pulses, it has low oil and it has low sugar. So yeah, basically the oily foods, like say macadamia nuts, or the sugary foods, say like dried apricots, yeah, they only get 2 to 3 years maximum. So that's why. So it's not like don't do it, but in terms of just initially, if you want a bulk amount of food that'll fill your tummy, focus on the grains and pulses, like they're the basis of all meals. So yeah, that's right. Any other questions so far?
Were there any other suppliers besides Amazon if we want to support smaller businesses or just not support Amazon?
Yeah, so there's a company called ProX, Pro-EX. So they supply stuff. I'd say it's 80% as good as the Wallaby goods. I'm specifically, the Wallaby goods have got the thickest one, and all round it's like the best. Can you see this? All round it's the best package. And because the Mylar bag with the oxygen absorber is the critical point of making this whole system work, that's why I recommend buying more, slightly jumping through a hoop, and just going with the pain of buying through Amazon. There's a chance that they'll sell directly, like, so they've got a website, but they just don't supply Australia yet. But it might change this year. It's one of those focus things for that company.
Andrew asked, have you ever used an oxygen chamber for the Mylar bags? I'm not quite sure what that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. Maybe, no, I don't know what you mean. You mean a vacuum sealer, maybe? So yeah, maybe I just mentioned that. So this looks like it's vacuum sealed, but it's not using a vacuum sealer. But the oxygen absorbers, they rust its iron filings with salts and clay. And then when I break this open and put it inside, it starts to rust the oxygen inside. So in this air, there's 21% oxygen, and I think it might bind like half of it. It binds to all of the oxygen and reduces its volume. So that's why it looks like it's vacuum sealed, but we don't need a vacuum sealer to seal it. You just need a hair straightener, $25 hair straightener from Big W or Kmart. Shall I?
Yeah, carry on with your PowerPoint there.
All right. So the amount you get is arbitrary. So more is better. It's just more is better. So people will start talking about 6 weeks, 3 months, 1 year, 2 years. Just the more you get, the better. So, these YouTubers, like, they're really great, but they tend to communicate stuff to the learners and the newbies. So it's all about getting people started. So I tend to go, so like I've just said, you could do this minimum order. Sure, you can do it even smaller than that. So it's arbitrary. It's just arbitrary how much you need. Unless you really think that the world's going to go back to normal, the more you can get, the better. Yeah. So basically, you're going to be choosing between like no variety. So I know one person that's just got wheat. They've got themselves a ton of wheat for $600, conventional. But that's, they don't have any variety. So I for myself, I've probably got about 20 different things. So you can get super cheap, more expensive, like just store it and leave it and forget about it. You could dig it underground, or you could mix it up with your own pantry, organic, non-organic, a small amount, big amount. Just do it for yourself or pay for assistance. So yeah, you could start ridiculously small. That's just me joking around. Already covered that. So that's these 10 to 12 crates. It's really not that much space for $500 worth. Yeah. All right, so let's cover the doom and gloom. I hope you're all ready for the doom and gloom. I'll try and paint a rosy picture. So I wrote in the top here the Tonga tsunami. But does anyone know what I mean by, like, the Tonga tsunami was one of the biggest effects on our worldwide food production in the last year? Does anyone can anyone elaborate on that?
I cannot, because I thought you would have said, like what they always talk about, the war in Ukraine and things, but But yeah, share us why Tonga?
So I put down the tsunami because that's the only thing that came to the mainstream media, but it was actually pretty much the biggest volcanic eruption in the last 100 years. It was up there with Mount Pinatubo in the 90s in the Philippines, and it blew up like a lot of dust and a lot of moisture, and that's basically one of the main causes of all this wet weather and cold weather we've had in this last year. So, like for instance, Lismore had 2 major floods within 6 months, and that was unheard of. Yeah, I could just go on and on, but yeah, it's almost as though they didn't want us to figure that out. Well, there's a lot of what's the word, deception going on, but the Tonga tsunami was really, really obvious. Like all of a sudden we had like these major wet weather things. So there's talk. This was one channel I cover that I've been following called Adapt 2030, and he's saying that the production in the southern hemisphere is down 50%. So what I'm showing you all here is like all of the factors that are pushing towards either low production or higher prices, etc., etc. So I'm covering the negatives. So Australian inflation, which we'll cover in a second, but just the fuel prices on diesel and petrol is basically, it's slowly bleeding into food. Yeah, the Ukraine situation, is also a factor. There's like over 10 countries that have banned exports of food. The most famous one is India. They basically said no. I think it's wheat or rice. I can't remember. They've just gone, no, we're not exporting anymore, and it just goes on and on and on. Yeah, the silly authorities, like whatever they've done, it's just another thing they could do. So the nitrogen production is kind of the biggest, most obvious one. So this is looking backwards. So so the world population, it's like 7 million, but basically around half of our population is dependent on this synthetic fertilizer. And but we've had like a doubling and tripling of fertilizer prices. Yeah, and there's this, you may have heard of it used to be the largest artificial fertilizing plant in the world was BASF in Germany, but it basically shut down because of the lack of supply of gas. And so that's just another major thing. And there just seems to be an agenda by the silly people, I like to say silly people, that they basically equivocate it with CO2 and are, discouraging, fertilizer stuff. So the thing I'm just assuming you guys all heard all this, but so Sri Lanka, the situation in Sri Lanka basically started with them banning artificial fertilizers for the whole country overnight. And then that's what made the farmers not self-reliant in terms of being able to afford fertilizers, not being ready to switch over to organic or say poo-based fertilizers. Yeah, and then cascaded onto a political change. So this is this diagram is by Frugal. So it's inflation changes. So it's not price changes. It's the rate of change of prices. So it doesn't mean it's gone up 9%. It's going up 9% year in, year out, unless it goes down. But that's, presumably people seem to be noticing the prices of everything's going up. And that's my gigantic change from 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So if you get food, basically you get to freeze the price, and all you need to do is look after the maintenance. You need to maintain your little stash or big stash of food. All right, so the overview of the whole thing: buy a crazy amount of food, just get grains and pulses to start with. If you buy $500 at the least, you get the bigger discounts, and it's kind of like 40% off retail. Just do it now or do it later, whatever. And then you get the option of eating that thing up to 10 years into the future. If you really, really want to go crazy big, you know, me and some mates have been talking about buying, 10 to 15 tons of food, take 2 weeks to process it all into Mylar bags. You pack it into drums and pallets and then put it into a 20-foot container. Questions so far? Where are we?
If you were to do the container, which sounds awesome, are there some things you need to consider with maintaining the container? Like if it's just not, if you don't go in there for a year or two, like do you have to do anything or seal it or anything like that?
In terms of security or in terms of accessing the pallets at the back?
No, I mean like moisture or just anything that's got, I know they're in Mylar bags, so technically it doesn't matter, but I don't know. I guess it's like putting it out of the sun so it doesn't get too hot or things like that. But I just wanted to know if there's anything in particular you thought of.
Yes. Yeah, so the heat is the only problem that needs to be also solved. So either put the container, either put the container inside you got to figure it out somehow. There's multiple ways of doing it. Yeah, it needs to be thought about. It just depends on where you put it. But yeah, those big drums are cacheable, but it's hard to access it. Yeah, it's not a ready solution. So yeah, it's something it's not off the shelf solution. And then plugging it in, it's expensive.
I really like the cache system for burying underground. And so I can imagine that if you had a few of these drums and you dug them in the ground, maybe if you had a property, but if you wanted to use it as an escape route, then you could bury one every, a couple of 100, I don't know how many kilometers you could do between each one, so that if you were trekking, you'd like, okay, I've got one here and I've got one here. It's like a bit of a treasure map, but food security in the right places.
Yeah. So these, I mean, this is a smaller one. This is a 30-liter drum, but kind of bigger the better. But that'll take, say, 10 of these. So it's about 30 kilos. You get about 30 kilos in there, which is, that's popcorn. So that's 3.5 kilos of popcorn, 3 kilos of rice, 3 kilos of wheat, 3 kilos of quinoa, if you're into that, 3 kilos of cacao powder, 3 kilos of coffee. Yeah. So what else have we got? Yeah. There's this, yeah.
Gail said the thing that's important with containers is she has a solar extractor fan. Works great even on those 30-degree days. Nothing spoiled or gone moldy. So where would you put your solar extractor fan? Would you put that in the container perhaps? Is that what you're suggesting, Gail? Sealed. Okay, you can seal it once you and then she asked a question, can they be sealed once you take out what you want? So can you reseal them?
You can, but that's why I recommend these 3 kilo ones, because you kind of are not obligated to reseal them. There are these much bigger ones. These are 5-gallon bags. You can get about 15, 20 kilos in that. Doing it this way, then, unless you're sharing it with like 20 other people, you kind of are going to need to reseal it again. Yes, you can. But it's just more complicated. Then you need extra one of these. You either have to make your own oxygen absorbers or, buy spares to have in the future. Whereas 3 kilos, if I cooked popcorn every 5 days, I could probably chew through that in 2-3 months, which should be fine. So that's why I recommend the smaller ones. Plus the smaller ones are kind of more robust. Like if something goes wrong with one of them, it's fine. They're just more robust. They're kind of harder to break accidentally. So yeah, you can reseal them, but it's kind of just an extra effort that's not worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Patricia said underground, just like I said, the root cellar system is probably really effective there. So it's only heat that we would need to worry about. So if you don't have, some people's garages are too hot to be able to store. Feel free to come off mute if you need to ask a question.
The mold, someone's mentioning mold. It should be, once they're in here, the mold problem shouldn't be a problem, because they're literally sealed, like totally sealed. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you want to go into, like Gail asked before, about the oxygen absorbers, because different food need different amounts?
Yeah, that's in the details. There's basically a sliding scale. It's not so much about the food per se, it's the volume of air between the food. So rice is really compact. These are popcorn, so there's kind of space between the popcorns. So it's all about the volume that's left. Yeah. So there's like a heap of it's easy to find on the internet, this scale, but yeah, it's easy to find.
Also, just like a recommendation of, if it's popcorn, it's more oxygen, so therefore use 2 or 3 or 4. If it's rice, use 1 or something like that.
Something like that. It's more the size of the bag to the amount of oxygen absorbers. I mean, these packets got 400 cc's, and these are so cheap. I mean, they're like 40 cents each. There's 10 of them in this bag. They're 40 cents, 50 cents, typically extra ones. So, you know, if you're really that keen, you can just add some more. That's the bag. It comes all together. These Wallaby bags, they come with the, you know, they come with the oxygen absorbers. Whereas pretty much wherever you buy it elsewhere, you gotta buy it together, and you gotta pre-think it out. Whereas that's kind of done for you.
Now, Oliver has, and we know this can be a bit of a minefield when you're first working this out. So we put together a bit of a plan for a presentation, so that you can have some guided help to put together your first Mylar bag kits. Oliver, do you want to talk more about that?
Perhaps just start with, if people are going to express some interest to find out more, give us an email to myself or yourself, Kelly. Yeah, because it'd be great if you have the bags, if you had the bags and the food to go. We can do the more detail, because it's a bit of a hands-on-y thing. Yeah, and there's a few other details to cover.
Okay, so so if you're interested in having a workshop with Oliver to help you go through what you need and to how to put together your Mylar food bags, Mylar bag storage, then reach out to me. Maybe let's do a little survey in the chat. Just type a yes in the chat if we put together a workshop, you'd be interested in that. And great, we got a lot of yeses coming through. And if you would be keen to do it on Zoom, just write Zoom in, so we can see how many people would be okay with a workshop on Zoom. Yep. For not Zoom. Okay, good. Good to know. Yeah. And so what we would do then is, yeah, okay, lovely. So we'll put together a bit of a workshop and to that feedback, because there'll be a lot of people who are watching the recording of this. And so if you're watching the recording, love you to send me a message, however you got the recording, put a message into the group that you're watching it in and say, wow, I would love a workshop either in person or on Zoom. I'll find it, don't you worry. So now, does anyone have any more questions for Oliver? And you could hear that I was wanting Oliver to expand on his how to, previous life before Mylar bags, but I don't want to put you on the spot there. Okay, what about other food storage, other food, water, petrol, diesel? Yeah, doing workshops on those. So we do have actually a food canning workshop coming up on the 11th of March. So did I say food? Fruit. We're doing an in-person fruit canning workshop. And I don't know, how do you store? I don't know. I store petrol and diesel in 20-liter containers. I don't know if anyone has any other way of doing that except for 44-gallon drums, which is hard to get these days. Question for you, Oliver. Do you freeze rice and flour? You don't like to store flour, do you?
No, not personally, but I think that was like the old-fashioned way of getting rid of the weevils. It seems to be overkill with this system of the oxygen absorbers. It seems to be overkill. So no.
You'd rather store the wheat than actually the flour, right?
Well,
you want to store whole grains.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer it, but it's obviously that you're avoiding that processing, because if you have the whole grains, you've got to figure out how to do the milling. It's not so much that it's wrong to do the flour, but the freezing itself seems to be overkill with this system, because this is relatively new, and the freezing is kind of like the first generation of doing all this. This is about 20-year-old technology, yeah, in terms of popularity amongst preppers. And before that, they were doing kind of other things. They were doing the freezing thing, because the weevils was like the most annoying thing back in the day, or it still is. It's still a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the brown rice, yes, that's the only grain that can't be done in this. For some reason, it goes rancid. It's just a little bit too oily or whatever it is. But pretty much every other grain and pulse does not have that problem. Yeah.
Right. So store white rice over brown rice. That's a really good tip, actually. Just going back to the chat, just about the petrol storage. Petrol will last 6 months. So you need to rotate it if you're storing it. And then, so you need to replace it when petrol prices are down. Basically, use it every 6 months.
Yeah.
And storing the process for dog biscuits, that's a smart idea, Gail, is Mylar bag food storage for dog biscuits too.
And chicken grain and anything else. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this stuff's gold, so it's gold. Anyway.
We can't forget the animals.
No. Oh, and also, like, if you compare, if this was chickpeas compared with chickpeas in a can, you're basically getting half price. Even if you bought it wholesale, I shouldn't say it by wholesale, but if you put it in this system, it's half price. Plus, these are sproutable or regrowable, and you can't get that with the. Plus, it's lighter. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really attractive to be able to resprout it, after 10 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So has anyone had any experience with Mylar bags themselves or food storage? I think everyone's learning at this point. My family have had food storage since ever I was a kid and growing up, and they used to store it in the tins, and maybe 20-liter tins, and they would just keep and stack one on top of the other, and they would keep them for 25 years. But then when they went to open them up, they were all full of weevils and rancid, but we would have the grinder and have to grind our own wheat. And that was my brother's jobs before breakfast, is grind the wheat for porridge. And so I can testify it does work and it is good. You know, but the Mylar bag system we didn't have growing up, and so having that is going to really protect your food storage much better than the old system of the tins and the 44-gallon drums that we used.
Yeah.
Gail says, what about for the boat? Crevicing. I don't know what that is. But I will say about storing, you don't have to have the drums, because these Mylar bags can store anywhere, and you actually want to store them in secret, right? So under couches and under beds are a really great place to hide your Mylar bags. You don't have to put them in the garage. It could be too hot there, but you might have a basement, or you might have you know, a lower floor of your house that they can be stored in, and so they're very handy that way, so they can fit anywhere, right?
It's cryovacuum, Kelly, that word.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on our boat, when we used to go away for 10 days or 2 weeks at a time, I used to cryovac the food. And all it is taking the air out. You can get a cryovac machine, and you get cryovacing bags, which are a thick plastic. And actually, I noticed Audi had one for sale the other day, and you can cryovac your food in smaller amounts. So you can do meat, chicken, you can freeze it, cryovac, and it keeps for months.
Is that like a form of freeze drying?
I guess so. The machine, how it works, it's what, you know, when you go to the butcher and you get meat and they're in plastic bags, it looks like the plastic has been shrunk around it. Yeah, vacuum sealing. Yeah, that's right. That sucks the air out of it.
Right. Yeah, gotcha. So good.
And I kept 2 weeks worth of meat, fish, prawns, all sorts of things just in a ice box, and it was fantastic.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and especially because you're going on the boat, so that would be important, because you need food. You can't dock it every 5 minutes to go get food.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we will up some events, and anyone who's interested in the event that we started to talk about last week about the DIY motor mechanics course, we're going to have some dates go up about that this week, so you can keep an eye out for that starting in March. So we had so you can go, if you haven't seen that video recording, you can go back to the website or in the Telegram group or on my YouTube channel, and you can rewatch that recording from last week, and we'll be having some DIY mechanics classes so that you can talk to your mechanic and not get ripped off.
Andrea had a good question, Kelly, about
sorry, I didn't see.
yeah, putting seeds in Mylar bags.
Right. Yeah. So there is a smaller bag that you can get. Do you want to talk about, or I don't know if you have it on hand there, Oliver? You didn't like the smaller bags, did you? Not for value for money, I think.
Not only in terms of recommending it as a start, but the smaller bags, yeah, can do the, you know, the spices or the seeds, gardening seeds. So that would be a yes. The oxygen is a deteriorating factor on all of the seeds, all of the types of seeds. But the keeping it cool is the other factor. So yes, that would assist with long-term viability of seeds.
Yeah, great idea. Beautiful.
And really, like these popcorn are seeds. Like I could be confident in 5 years' time I could sell that to a farmer and he could make, you know, a hectare of popcorn, something like that.
We're growing corn.
Yeah, well, popcorn specifically. So, yeah, and you can't do that. You kind of can't do that. As soon as you process the other stuff, you can't do it that way. But that's also a major upside of doing it in this, with this system. Yeah.
I feel like you've just alluded to something that I don't know. What's the difference between the growing popcorn and corn?
Popcorn has, I don't know what the magic ingredient is, but it is a slightly different variety than corn. Yeah.
Huh.
But it still grows on a cob, or?
Yeah, but it's a slightly different variety. It's specifically for popping. Yeah, and apparently it's a 4,000-year-old, like the Indians in North America. They were growing popcorn back in the day.
There you
And,
go.
yeah.
I learned something. It's awesome. Well, I'm going to end the recording here unless anyone has any questions, and then usually after I end the recording, there's a lot more conversation that happens. So if you're not here in the room and you're watching the recording, then you might miss out on a bit of gold. But do join us next week, because next week we have Rick J. Peterson from Queensland, who is a bush survivalist, trainer extraordinaire. He actually is doing lots of homeschool training there in Queensland for people who taking their kids along and learning bush survival. So we're lucky in Sydney, we've got some locals here that look after us, but I came across Rick and I love what he's doing in Queensland. So I wanted just to share with you all what he's up to there. And then so stay tuned for that, and we will see you on next week. Thank you everyone for joining me tonight. And thank you, Oliver, for sharing with us your skills and knowledge and expertise.
Thank you, Oliver. It was great.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Oliver.
very much appreciated. It was brilliant. Very, very
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver.
Beautiful.